Nick, what's going on, man? Thanks for being here with me today.
Hey, hey, hey. Hi, Donnie.
What's going on, man? I know you're clear across the country for me, and actually, I think you're out of the country, right? Where are you located right now?
Yeah, we're hunkering down currently in Costa Rica.
Ooh, nice. How's it out there?
Same everywhere. We're lockdown mode. The beaches are closed. The pools are closed. Nobody's raiding the stores or anything like that. I mean, it's all very chill. But live in a little tourist town, so tourism is obviously stopped and the streets are empty. So it's a bit surreal.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely some interesting times we're in right now, no
How are
doubt.
you doing?
I'm in the Bay Area, and we were hit pretty hard, kind of first with everything here, and got put on shutdown before a lot of other people did. So, yeah, it's been interesting. We just got word that our kids are going to be um, in in school, basically homeschool until the end of May, or until the beginning of May 1st is the earliest now.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, but we're like everybody else, just kind of doing what we can do.
Yeah, I just saw a video. Actually, someone shared a drone video of San Francisco, like just going through the streets, and you recognize all the streets, and it's just nobody. And you're like, maybe that's the downtown area, but
No,
yeah,
it's kind of
very
like that everywhere. Everywhere you drive around here in the Bay Area, there's not a whole lot going on. So
okay.
and we normally have plenty of traffic. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of ghost townish as you're driving around these places right now. So I'm sure a lot of people are, as their communities are getting shut down, are kind of facing the same thing. It's just kind of an eerie feeling.
Yeah. Well, on a positive note, we're still seeing a lot of usage on Honeit. I mean, recruiter activity in terms of talking to candidates and talking to clients. That's still happening. So I mean, I guess while there might be less recs and there might be a hiring freezes happening here and there. It seems like recruiters are still taking the time to have those conversations and,
Yep.
continue the relationship building and that kind of thing so that as soon as, the recs unlock or hiring unfreezes, they'll be ready
Yep.
with candidates so there's still things we can be doing, but everything's a bit uncertain.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely the time to be building relationships and seeing how you can help and lead your community and things like that. But all that stuff we can't control what's going to happen with the market, but being human, I think, is probably one of the best advantages we have going for us right now, and just seeing how people are doing and how you can help out.
That's right. That's right. There's been a number of these kind of chat groups, hangout groups, right?
Yeah.
Where just everybody's kind of working from home doing their work, but there's like 15 people on the screen, and it's just a little bit of camaraderie, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's even
Well, I think
helpful.
that's the one positive about this whole thing is that people are really you're starting to see communities and people rally together, and it's been nice to see how people are rising up for this. So I mean, if there is a silver lining, then I think that would be it right now. But for those of you that are listening in, Nick and I are going to talk. He's going to demo his software, Honeit software, here in a little bit. We're not quite there yet, but just stick around. We're going to dig into a software that could be really, really an advantage for your team right now during this time. So we'll get into that. So stick around. But Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the recruiting industry and kind of where you're at now?
Awesome. Yeah, I went. I kind of fell into it as a lot of us did. I moved to New York City to work in the music business. I'd always been a fan of music and that whole world, and but picked a strange time to try to get into that space. It was right after the Napsters and all the peer-to-peer music sharing and all of that was just kind of taking down the industry. But so I moved to New York City, and a cousin of mine had a friend who worked at a recruiting agency, and said, why don't you go there and maybe she could help you find a job. So I literally walked into a recruitment agency looking for help, and they said, you got a kind of a technical or scientific background. You seemed like a people person. Have you thought about tech recruiting? I was like, what's that? And so they hired me there. I got to kind of help build out a tech recruiting arm of this. It was a healthcare recruiting company, I believe, at the time. But met my boss Jay, got along with him great. Followed him to another recruiting firm that was also a software company in the vendor management space. So that was an interesting view of the middleman, right? Where we got to, we had a great client called DoubleClick that was later acquired by Google, and we
Right.
managed all the agencies for them and also helped them fill some key recs and things. But that was my first peek at the world of the middleman, and started to see how some recruiting agencies differ than others, because we could see how, one agency submitted candidates through us to our client, versus another. And you could start to see, wow, some people just forward resumes, other people do write-ups, other people really put time into their submittals. So this idea that, one submittal isn't, submittals aren't the same necessarily from agency to agency or from recruiter to recruiter.
Right.
So that was an insight. And then I moved in-house, and it was actually great. One of the Susie Rust, awesome recruiter, is someone I placed at DoubleClick. I recruited a recruiter to work at DoubleClick, and she always would get inundated with like, hey, come work for this, full-time jobs, but she liked consulting. That's just her thing. So she said, Nick, got this opportunity from MTV. You got to talk to him. Like she said, Nick, you got to go try go in-house. I'll never forget that. So she hooked me up with that. Went in as a recruiting manager at MTV Viacom. That was really interesting to get to know hiring managers, and you feel like you're part of the company, and now you're working with a lot of different hiring managers internally on achieving goals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So stayed there for 4 years at Viacom, and then moved to the Bay Area. I wanted to get closer to the startup scene. I wanted to get closer to the Bay Area, that world of tech. And I also was excited about going back to business school. I was supporting technology and product at MTV Viacom, and a lot of the people on the business side of product, the people doing the deals, digital distribution deals, how does Viacom get their content on Netflix and
Mm-hmm.
mobile channel, all that stuff was fascinating to me. And so, there was a business side of product development, and helping fill jobs there. I really got interested in like, I need to learn a little bit more about business. I was a math and physics person in school, and just didn't know much about the business side of things. So that also brought me back to California.
Nice. Where were you at in the Bay Area?
I lived in Oakland for about 7 years. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, we loved it. I had a little trifecta. I worked at TubeMogul in Emeryville, went to school in Berkeley, and then lived in Oakland. So I had like a little East Bay.
Yep.
triangle.
Yep. East Bay.
East
Raiders
Bay.
and A's. That's what I equate the East Bay to.
It was a blast. It was fun to see the Warriors come up,
Yeah.
from nowhere. That was a fun thing to see, and didn't get into the Raiders really. But.
Yeah. Yeah, they're tough to get behind anyways. The Vegas Raiders.
I'm glad I didn't invest a few years into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about where you're at now, man. How did you get into the Honeit, software? How did that all come about?
So it kind of took me, having seen kind of different sides of the ecosystem, and then going to business school in the evenings and learning about marketing and finance and accounting and how all these other functions in a business use data to make better decisions, right? I was learning a lot. And then I come back to my day job, and I was managing recs, and I was managing a team of recruiters, and I was looking around, and here we are talking, frantically scribbling notes or typing notes during an interview, and then turning to a hiring manager and trying to like convince them that, the person we just spoke with for 30 minutes is worth their time.
Right.
And I remember going like, we didn't really have a lot to back up our recommendation, right? We had a resume, but they weren't on the call that we just had. They didn't hear about that example of the product pivot that someone went through, or, overcoming, a tough situation and working through it and solving a problem, right? We heard that story, but they didn't. They just looked at the resume.
Right.
So I felt there was a bit of a disconnect between the conversation I had and the scribbled notes that I shared with someone else to read and interpret. I just felt like we're taking a step backwards, And so this idea of sharing audio highlights or audio sound bites or data, where it's not my interpretation of the candidate I just spoke with, it's letting the candidate speak for themselves. And I recognize that's what a lot of the one-way video interview tools were trying to do, right? Where the output is some audio highlights. The problem was, I would never reach out to a software engineer, a product person, say, hey, we'd love to chat with you about this job. Hey, do this homework. Record yourself, answer these questions, and maybe we'll talk to you. Like that just, I could never figure out how do you fit these like one-way interview tools into a, when you're trying to recruit and source like top talent in the Bay Area, right? So I felt fundamentally that conversations still mattered, like those kickoff calls with a hiring manager, probably the most important part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then those daily phone conversations with candidates, super important. Yet, what was the output? Where's the data, right? And I don't mean data by just like KPIs and lagging metrics. Oh, you talked to 5 people this week. Good job. Good data point. No, not that data. The 30-minute conversation you had with the candidate, that's content.
Right.
That's right. And so there was just a bit of a, and it's part of it also was just learning about how modern sales organizations, right? Why does one seller sell 10x the revenue of the salesperson down the hall or down the aisle? Well, sales organizations are starting to analyze those conversations, right? They're calling it conversation intelligence. They're using AI to analyze sales conversations and extract insights so that everyone does better. Everyone sells more. The company grows faster.
Right.
And just, I think that's fascinating. A lot of innovation in recruitment and HR follows that of sales and marketing, right? Any of these tool techniques that we're doing to attract and source and recruit and build brands, and a lot of that comes from marketing. Well, here's something that's happening right now with sales conversations, that we think we can apply well to interview conversations. And so once you start to ask the same candidates 5, 6 technical questions, whether it be web analytics or QA automation or whatever the domain it is you're talking to them about, interview with 20 people, have 20 conversations, ask the same structured questions, you can quickly extract a lot of interesting insight around what makes a good versus bad answer, and specific to that hiring manager, specific to that rec that you're working on. So this idea of interview data, interview intelligence, it's at the tip of our tongue. It's happening every day on the telephone calls you're already having. Our industry just hasn't really thought of that as content and data that we can use to make better decisions.
Right. So, what are some of the key outcomes that you're seeing? Because I know that the software right now you're using both for the actual employers themselves, the corporations, if you will, and then also for like third-party agencies. So what's kind of some of the feedback that you're getting from clients that are starting to use this?
Yeah, for me, when you look at the kind of the spectrum of how, let's start at the farthest, who's furthest away from the hiring manager.
Right.
It's that external agency sourcer, right? So you've got a hiring manager who had a kickoff call with an internal recruiter, who talked to the account manager at agency, who talked to the recruiter at the agency, who talked to the sourcer at the agency about, hey, we got a hot rec.
Right.
So think about the misinterpretation and miscommunication downstream from hiring manager to agency sourcer to candidate on what the role's about, what's interesting about the opportunity, what problems are they solving, like all of that stuff, right? Now let's flip it. Like, look at that agency sourcer who's on the phone with a candidate trying to tell them what's exciting, trying to understand if this candidate's right for this particular role, who probably hasn't had any touch with the actual hiring manager or decision maker. It's all he said, she said on what they're working on. So in that situation, who's farthest from the source of truth? It's the agency sourcer, and then ultimately the candidate. Right? But at the end of the day, what's a candidate really want? They want to know what the job is really about and who's their boss. So we put so much distance between that poor candidate who's like, sure, I'd like to learn more, and what the role really is. And I will show you later, that's where we can turn a kickoff call with a hiring manager into an audible job preview. That first internal corporate recruiter had a great conversation with the hiring manager about the rec. They asked him, hey, what's exciting about the role? What's interesting? What problems are you solving? Why would someone want to do it here versus across the street? Like, that's all rich insight that can be easily now shared downstream. So everybody in line kind of hears it for themselves, and you can even share kind of key sound bites with a candidate to get them excited about a role. And now they can meet their future boss at the first step rather than the 5th step. So agencies have a lot to gain just in terms of, standing out from the competition, attracting the right candidates. And then ultimately, I like to say, like, how many phone screens does it take to get a candidate on site? There's candidates that are having 2 or 3 or 4 phone interviews. And again, let's not take the current crisis into consideration. Let's talk about coronavirus, where we were working in offices and even sitting next to each other, and still candidates were having to have the same conversation with the sourcer, with the recruiter, with the internal recruiter, with the hiring manager before everybody felt this person's worth inviting on site, right? And I just thought that is just super inefficient. So now we're seeing companies go from a single phone screen with an external sourcer. They share a few highlights with their account manager, recruiter. Yeah, sounds great. Let's submit them. Internal recruiter. Sounds great. I don't need to rescreen them. My reputation's, they sound great. I've got proof, Hiring manager. Wow, sounds great. I don't need to spend another 45 minutes on the phone with this candidate. Let's get them on site. So we're seeing some incredible efficiencies from the agency side of things, or from sourcer to recruiter, even within an agency. And then, we've got some incredible testimonials from corporate TA VPs that are saying, last year and the year before, we used to have to outsource half of our hires to agencies because our recruiters couldn't talk to enough candidates, and our hiring managers there was bottlenecks throughout that process. Well, one of our clients, a big big insurance company in the South, they were able to hire all of their recs with no additional staff, no external agencies, those 50 hires that they would typically have outsourced, during the month of December and January. And it's because recruiters could automatically schedule calls, pick up the phone, have a great 8-minute conversation with the candidate, ask the key 3 to 4 questions, hang up the phone. Hiring manager heard 1 minute of that conversation, the key moments, and said, yep, invite them on site, right? Yep. So they literally consolidated and removed entire rounds of the interview process by sharing a little bit of data instead of, opinions, essentially.
Right. So it sounds like it's just way more efficiency, and then also a lot more transparency are two of the key things that I think are, major outcomes when we're using the software.
Yeah, recruiter and hiring manager trust and relationship building. Yep. That's, at the end of the day, that's the most challenging thing. And I think ultimately it's that. Why is that? Well, you've got a hiring manager, you've got a candidate, and they speak the same language, whether it's accounting, finance, QA automation, web analytics. They're the experts, right? You've got some recruiter in the middle, and there's a reason for us to take the phone screen to give time back to the line of business. But we've got to recognize that we're not the subject matter experts, right?
Right.
So if a hiring manager says something we don't understand, there's a disconnect. If a candidate says something we're not quite sure of, there's a big disconnect, right? Well, when we start to share data from hiring manager to candidate and let them pitch the role directly to the candidate, it's not about us trying to pitch the role, or, there's no misinterpretation, miscommunication there. When we share a quote from a candidate to a hiring manager, there's no more misinterpretation or miscommunication there.
Right. Where do you feel, you kind of mentioned how it was before the current crisis, but how can external agencies use this during this crisis to make a more transparent, hiring process? Because I know everybody right now is just looking for better ways to keep the ball rolling and make sure that they're servicing, just helping people.
I think it's all about conversations. And again, we've seen a lot of tools that are, a lot of folks in our industry are trying to say, you can robot interviews, or you have the candidate interview themselves and screen themselves. Like, what? Like, I wouldn't want to do that if I was applying for a job. So I think the first is that these conversations count. There's uncertainty of candidates. Candidates are timid. Candidates might not know if their job's going to be around.
Right.
They're probably more willing than ever to have a conversation with a recruiter, right? Hedge their bets, right? So I would think now is a great time to talk to candidates who are also a little worried about what the future holds, who may not be actively looking before the crisis, but now might be willing to take that call and have a conversation about other opportunities just in case. So I think now is the time. And I think we talk about phone interviews versus video interviews. I fundamentally believe phone interviews are just easier. There's nothing to download or install. You don't have to worry about your web browser and the version of, or the candidate. Right. So, and then now it's kind of funny in that we're seeing all of these whoopsies with video interviewing, people, forgetting to turn off the camera, or kids walking
going to the bathroom during a meeting.
Yeah, like this hilarious stuff that happens with video where a recruiter might want to interview in their bathrobe, right? Now they're at home, like you might not want to have to spend an hour getting ready to have a 15-minute call, right? Yeah. So, our system we support phone, and we're going to bring back video. just because, we're not anti-video. We just think telephone interviews are easier and more fair.
Yep.
You don't necessarily need to see what the person looks like to make a decision. Whereas meetings and video collaboration for a meeting, that might be a different story. But when we talk about hiring and recruiting and diversity and inclusion, maybe you don't need the video at the initial conversation. So we're seeing, agencies, it's like pick up the phone, have those great conversations that you're having already. But now you can automatically record and transcribe those calls, never forget a detail, rewind the tape, or even share some highlights from those calls to accelerate next steps.
Love it. Would you be willing to show that software with us and let's take a peek under the hood?
Sweet. Sounds good. Let me see if I can share my screen with you.
You shared it with me the other day. I mean, the stuff is pretty awesome, guys. As you guys see this is very, very advanced, really cool stuff that he's about to show us here. So,
all right. So, at the end of the day, it's, and let me just open up. So what I was showing you here is, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the interview dashboard, right? If we were going to do a phone interview with Jill or a video interview with Jill, this is what a recruiter would see. The candidate doesn't see any of this. To the candidate, it's just a phone call. They dial in at the time. We automate the scheduling. We send out interview reminders and text message reminders, all that kind of stuff. But then when you join a call, the recruiter comes in, they pick the QA automation engineer screening guide. These are the key questions that a hiring manager wants the recruiter to ask candidates for this specific QA automation role, right? And then you connect to the call by either dialing in. I can dial in over a landline or a mobile phone or talk through my web browser. In this case, I'll just talk through my web browser. You hear some groovy tunes, hold music. And here it is. Hey, Jill, how's it going? Thanks so much for applying, or great to hear back from you on LinkedIn. You just have that natural phone conversation with a candidate. But when Jill, the candidate, starts telling me about her Selenium experience, which is an automated testing framework, I can mark that moment in time. That becomes a searchable keyword, and it's a jump link that I can jump back to that moment in the conversation 6 months from now and listen to her talking about Selenium, right? Or I can say, hey, Jill, so, describe your ideal QA team. How do you work with the engineering team? How do you embed yourself within the engineering organization to really make the most happen? Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, blah, blah. She's going to give me this great answer about how her current engineering organization is structured with QA, or how she did it at the last company, the benefits, pros, and cons, and I'm just listening. And I'm not frantically taking notes because everything's being captured. And then when she winds down her answer, I can click the stop button, and that creates a highlight. And now when
I think I love that feature of it. That it's not necessarily a whole phone call, but like, what are the key points? What are the highlights of that call? I think that's so efficient. That's awesome.
Yeah, nobody wants to share a 30-minute interview with a hiring manager. Who has time for that? And that defeats the whole purpose of a recruiter phone screen. But the idea is I can hang up the phone. Hey, we can say our goodbyes. Jill, really appreciated the time today. I think you'd be great. I'd love to share your resume and a couple of highlights from our call with a hiring manager. Next steps will be an on-site interview. Talk to you soon. All the best. Bye. Say your goodbyes, hang up by hitting end call. And that takes 2 seconds to click a button and create a link like this, where now I just had a great call with Jill. I asked the key structured technical questions for that particular role. I share a link. It's just a lightweight link. You could email it. You could Slack it. You could put it in your ATS or CRM. However you present candidates to hiring managers today, you can now include a link that says, P.S. I've included a few highlights from our call. Let me know what you think.
Right. And then you can actually just get like that. You're showing me the other day, the whole sending the feedback thing there. You just get real time. That's where you're
hiring manager,
like, yeah, let's get them on site type of thing.
Yeah. It's kind of like, dear hiring manager, what are the key questions you would typically ask candidates in your QA interviews? Well, Nick, I would ask these 3 or 4 questions. Okay, cool. Let me ask those questions for you.
Right.
On the very first call. And now you can listen to those answers that you already know what makes a good versus great answer, hiring manager, because you're the expert. And you can quickly listen to that person's answer.
Really enjoyed working with a lot of the senior management teams. I think that
And then if the hiring manager likes what they hear, they can say, wow, let's get her on site, right? And then quickly goes back to that recruiter. Hey, Jill, how's your schedule look next week?
Yep.
You know, so again, it's a little bit like the output here isn't that dissimilar to a one-way video interview tool, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
highlights. The big difference is that we gave Jill the time, we answered her questions, we got to pitch her on the opportunity, we built a relationship, you know, and you know, important within corporate TA, but even more important when you start talking about agency recruiters. And those relationships with candidates last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm still in touch with the candidates I placed at DoubleClick who are now at Google from 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so you asked earlier, where do agency recruiters stand out? Well, that agency recruiter who talked to Andy, if you outsourced it, Andy doesn't know you, Andy doesn't like you, Andy doesn't trust you, right?
Right.
If you have a great conversation with Andy, Andy remembers you. Andy
Right.
will think of you the next time they're looking for a job, right? And reach out to you. So again, there's companies that can get that say conversations don't count, and there's companies that recognize we can automate almost everything else in the recruiting process, but I would argue it's our conversations that matter more than ever.
Right. Now, are they doing any, I mean, we keep talking about kind of that initial phone screen, but is there more that you're doing with this, you know, beyond that, if there's multiple rounds of phone interviews with some companies, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, you can,
that out?
Yeah, I mean, this works in a variety of situations. So you can schedule a call between a candidate and a hiring manager. Both parties will get an invite. They both dial in. We can record and transcribe those calls. And a hiring manager doesn't have to learn the dashboard. You know,
Right.
They can just have a call, but now your organization can capture all that insight, right? And
Yep.
we're also very excited about bringing Honeit into the interview room, right? You know, before companies hire a candidate, they might have 6 hours of conversations, but historically, there's nothing to show for that, you know? So I think this idea of interview data and interview intelligence, you know, happens a lot of places. On the first phone call, video interviews, on-site interviews, it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, do you guys offer kind of like these templated questions, or is like everything custom set up for each client, or is it hybrid, like a little bit of both?
So let me just end this. And so we've got an interview guide library, you know, so to speak, with some general templates. But the idea is for companies to really create custom interview guides specific to that client, specific to that hiring manager.
Right.
Right. So a recruiter can come in and create their own structured guide, or they can send a hiring manager a link. This would have their branding and their recruiter profile on it. But this is a link you could send to the hiring manager and say, hey, excited to work with you on this new web analytics director role. Let us know the 4 to 5 questions you'd like our team to ask, right? So hiring managers can create the guides, recruiters can perform the screens, hiring managers can hear the highlights.
That's awesome, man. I think this is incredible. You guys have spent a lot of time on this thing. I can tell.
I mean, the other thing around this is like, I would argue the most important conversation in recruiting is that kickoff call or intake call a recruiter has with a hiring manager. Hey, like you shared the job description, but like, I'm sure we just copied and pasted the bullet points. Like what are you really looking for? Right? Like what's the problem this person's trying to solve for, right? Well, those kickoff calls are interviews too. You're just interviewing the hiring manager, right? And so, you know, if you have a call guide called, you know, hiring manager intake session, it might look something like this. And when you talk to the hiring manager through the system, you can ask them the key questions about, hey, why is this job open? What's the most exciting part of this role? You know, how does this role impact the greater business?
Mm-hmm.
Like, tell me about the team this person would be working with. And all those great questions come with usually great answers, but it's usually only one person that gets to hear it, right?
Right.
Well, if you record and transcribe and capture all of that intake data, you can now share it downstream with recruiters and sourcers so that everybody's on the same page. They know the role that the hiring manager is looking for. And then let's take it one step further. If a hiring manager gets you buzzing and you're like, wow, I'm excited to work on this role. Well, whatever the hiring manager said that got you excited to work on this role and partner with them on that search, like, let's share that soundbite with the candidate at the front end of the process to get them excited about the role. So you've got these job preview highlights, same flow, schedule, screen, share, but now you got a link that you can paste in your outbound emails or your campaigns to passive candidates to say, hey, I'm working with PubMatic. Abhishek's awesome. You'd love to work with him. He's a great hiring manager. get to know this opportunity right from Abhishek.
Yeah, so this particular role, this is a role for solutions engineer with some JavaScript experience. This particular role sits in the middle of.
And again, we're not talking about extra steps. We're not talking about
Right.
sending in a video crew and doing with the lights and the awkwardness and the pressure. We're talking about a relaxed, fit phone conversation. And, you know, it's already happening. It's the kickoff call. So like, what can we do with that great conversation to help excite a candidate, help them meet their future hiring manager or future boss, and get to know what's the real job? Because we all know, you know, job descriptions have been copied and pasted for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what I'm seeing with job description innovation. You know, there's folks in our space that are really starting to say, hey, no, like take time to write a great job description. Let's
Right.
make sure it's fair and it's inclusive. And I think all that stuff's great, but I'm also saying that's still just text, and that's still
Right.
a recruiter's interpretation of what the job is. Let's go right to the source.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Why is this job open? What problem is it solving for? And let's let the hiring manager explain it.
Well, I think that's what you guys have done so well, is that it looks, you know, it's not just like solving one side of the coin. It really does create the transparency on the candidate side too. I mean, obviously for, you know, us, you know, in the industry, you know, our client sometimes is where we're trying to get, you know, deliver the most value because they're the one, you know, keeping our lights on, so to speak. But the fact that we're able to kind of create the same type of process for the candidate to have transparency around the company is just absolutely, I think that's so important now more than it's ever been. But I think that's a great thing that you guys have incorporated here, that it's kind of a two-way thing, you know, so the candidates get the transparency too.
Yeah, I think underlying all of this is like, and for the agency recruiters too, and for the agency recruitment leadership or the agency recruiter, the owners of those staffing firms, you know, it's like at the end of the day, what are we doing with, you know, a recruiter's job is to talk to candidates and to screen candidates. And if there's high turnover and your recruiters are leaving your organization, like those scribbled notes on those notepads go with those recruiters, right? So it's like, what is in your CRM, right? Is it scribbled notes that recruiters aren't even going to put in your CRM? Or is it, let me just show you. So let's just type, or what's in your CRM? We can search for keywords like marketing and quickly search all the conversation that one recruiter has had or that all your recruiters have had for candidates who have mentioned marketing. Here's our call, Donnie.
Yep.
So this was the call we had a couple days ago, and I could click into our conversation, and it happened last week, I guess.
Yep.
But it's as if it happened this morning. I've got the call transcript. I've got some notes. I've got the question that I asked you, you know. But let me go back. Let's look at one that's, you know, here's Swan. I spoke with her in 2018, right? Imagine if you could quickly rediscover and research all of the conversations you've had over your career and rewind the tape and remember those calls.
Right.
You know, so here we have the keywords that were tagged during it, the full hour-long conversation with Swan, those key questions I asked her, you know, the full call transcript, right? And it could be 2 years later. I talked to Swan in 2018, but oh my gosh, she'd be great for this new head of marketing role that just popped up. Share highlights. Oh, these are the best answers we heard from Swan. Her resume is already in there. And boom, I'm going to create a share link and put this to my new client. And we don't have to rescreen Swan, you know, even though, you know, the conversation's there.
Yeah, no, it's like you're saying, it's a big data thing to be able to have all this in one, you know, one place and, you know, keep a good pulse on your candidate pool. And I'm sure there's, you know, can you go back and research calls from the clients as well, or just the keynotes from the clients as well?
So if you're using Honeit with those next steps, yeah, that's really great insight. I mean, and I think that might skew a little more towards internal corporate recruiting teams where you know, founders and CEOs, they want to know, like, who are the best interviewers in our company, right? Like who's good at interviewing, right? How would you know? Interview conversations are behind closed doors. Nobody has any idea how recruiters are pitching companies or how hiring managers are pitching companies or what questions they're asking. And so you know, um, you know, this gives you a really great insight into, is that junior hiring manager ready for prime time? Are they handling themselves? Are they, are they recruiting are you putting A players on the phone to talk with A player candidates? If not, who are your A players in your organization you want to be involved in the hiring process?
Yeah. Now, this is valuable in a lot of different ways. And just like you were talking the other day, and you mentioned it earlier, is that, how this could be used as part of your team from a sales standpoint, who's selling better than the next guy and who's closing better than the next guy, and have those calls recorded too. I mean, there's just so many ways you can actually utilize this tool.
Well, I just think our conversations count. And if you start to think of conversations as content and data, it just kind of, it opens our mind of like, what is the inputs and outputs of recruiting,
Right. What else should we know, man? I think you've kind of covered it thoroughly, but
I just think it's, we're getting a lot of buzz about video interviews, right?
Yep.
And I think part of this is also just coming back to what's easy, what removes friction. And I think phone conversations, it's weird to say phone interview innovation or phone interview technology, isn't it? It's almost embarrassing to say, but it's like, if there's one tool a recruiter wouldn't want to probably ever give up, it would probably be the telephone, right?
Right.
Yet the phone interview has not evolved, over the last 30 years.
Yeah, no, this is certainly the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's pretty awesome, man. If you're comfortable, I mean, how do you guys typically charge? What's kind of the pricing? You guys have any specials going on right now, or?
It's per recruiter per month, just kind of a SaaS subscription model, month to month. So you can cancel anytime. We're actually offering 1 month free pilots, free access with everybody working from home, and just know that's a big change. But, we're seeing this improve communication and collaboration between sourcers and recruiters, and between recruiters and hiring managers, right? And so when you're not able to run down the hall and pitch your case to a hiring manager, what can you do to get them excited about the person you just spoke with? And so I think we're really excited about this idea of how can we screen and assess a candidate from one phone call as a group, as a team. But yeah, we're offering 1 month free trials. You can sign up directly on the site. And then from there, our paid plans vary in terms of the number of interviews you need or you do per month, right? There's some recruiters who talk to a couple candidates a week. There's other recruiters who talk to 7 candidates a day. And so, there's different plans based on your usage, essentially.
Got it. And the website's honeit.com. Just go there to sign up?
Yep, honeit.com. And if you go to our Get Started, there's a tab up top that says Get Started. You can sign up for a free trial without swiping your credit card. And we recommend just do a practice call with a friend or a colleague. It's hard to explain all the benefits of the system. It's just like, give it a spin. And if you are tired of manually scheduling calls, if you're tired of scribbling notes, and if you're tired of spending 20 minutes to put together a write-up, this really automates that flow.
Right. How can everybody get in contact with you specifically, Nick?
Nick@honeit.com is my direct email, nick@honeit.com. But yeah, I think, I'm a recruiter, I'm a recruiter. And I think it's really strange to be a vendor now, to be honest. It's like, I want to be able to contribute to conversations and things like that without going, oh, you're a vendor. Like your opinion doesn't count anymore or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, you're coming from a place of experience though, so that's great.
Yeah, I think the recruitment profession adds a lot of value, and I think hiring managers need time more than ever, right? Hiring managers are busy, and if a job is open, by definition, that hiring manager is stressed and overworked, right? Like, because they're picking up the slack of whatever job that is. And it's like, if they've convinced the CEO that they need an additional headcount, it's like there's in fact gap and constraint in their team that needs to be addressed. And the hiring manager is likely picking up the slack until that job is filled. So whatever we can do to give more time back to the hiring manager, to give more time back to the line of business, to say, hey, trust me, and here's why you can trust me, and let me save you from having to do the phone call that I just did. Like, I just answered that. I just did the phone screen. You don't need to necessarily do the same phone screen, right?
Yeah.
So
That's great. What would you say? I mean, what are you most excited about with the business right now? I mean, obviously we're going through some difficult times currently, but when you look at just what's next for you guys, what are you excited about?
Oh, it's a big question, and it's changed over the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
I mean, really, everything is reframed, isn't it? I mean,
yep.
My hope is that not just the countries, but the world can kind of stick together and through this. And I think, I'm hoping that jobs might look different. Jobs might look and feel a little bit different after this, right? And I think this is probably going to open up companies to the idea of work from home or remote workers, or hiring people that's not sitting down the hall from you. It's probably going to open that up. There's a lot of companies that have been doing that already, right?
Right.
That's why the WeWorks of the world have been taking off, right? Like just people who don't want to work in their house, can rent a space that's pretty cheap and have office environment, or startups can go into a WeWork and grow with it and not have to worry about real estate and leases and things like that. They get very complicated as you scale a business and things like that.
Right.
So I think this new world of remote is going to really shake up this whole idea of having a corporate HQ, and do you necessarily need an office for every person that works in your organization, and how expensive real estate is commercially. I think companies are going to see a lot of benefit, assuming the tools are there. And a lot of companies are adapting Slack and other ways to communicate and collaborate. I'm hoping Honeit can be that interview collaboration platform that people can look to say, how do we make better decisions faster as a team around hiring and recruiting?
Right.
And I'm hoping we can help that, within our industry.
No, it's great. I know speaking with a lot of people, I mean, I'm not on the ground, like a lot of you guys, but working within this industry and being a vendor like yourself, is, the feedback's definitely there about the hiring process and the recruiting process just always being slow. So I think that's going to be a massive thing that you guys solve, is being able to speed that up and have more transparency, especially there's going to be, the way the market's going to react to this as we come through is people are going to be very nervous, about everything probably, and the transparency part I think is going to be key and be very helpful for people moving forward. I
think you're right. And I think recruiters have to remind themselves, like there's uncertainty about, are we going to keep our jobs? Just like candidates are having uncertainty about, are they going to keep their jobs? So I think even if there's a hiring freeze in your organization, I don't think should be a freeze for conversations and building pipelines and talking to candidates, and that, you have your conversations today, you can make your hires tomorrow. If you wait to start the screening or recruiting process until the rec opens, you're going to be 2 months out.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to be behind. And so I think recruiting corporations that recognize that now more than ever is the time to have those phone conversations with candidates, at least introduce yourself, start the conversation. And then as soon as that rec gets approved, you've got a pre-screened candidate to present to the hiring manager quickly.
Yeah,
right?
That's a great point. I think that's a great point. Is there's a lot of people that are kind of sitting and waiting and watching to see what's happening. Is like the people that take the most action right now are the people that are going to be, first and foremost, they're going to be able to help people right now. They're going to be able to lead people through this, whether it's a client or a candidate, which is so important. We need leaders. And I'm not talking about our government leaders or any of that. Like, we need leaders on the ground floor, doing this and helping improve people's lives. And then, the ultimate result and benefit of doing that is going to be, business in the future, and building the relationships. So I think now is just a tremendous time to really load that pipeline, nurture those relationships, be a human, be a helper in any way that you can, and it'll all come back full circle.
And
I think
people will never forget the person that helped them in that situation. Like, right? Like, being you're a startup, I'm a startup. I'll never forget the first customers. I will never forget the person who made that intro, right? I will never forget that person that retweeted that thing, right? Like those earliest retweets. I mean, right? Like, all that stuff is super supportive. Every like, every retweet, or every introduction via email, you'll never forget those, right? Just like just like if you're uncertain about your job, recruiter reaches out about, hey, I understand you may not be looking, we're ready to make a move, understand, happy to chat about these types of opportunities at a few of our clients if there's interest, or if you're reaching out from a company, hey, if there's ever interest in exploring opportunities at our company, happy to have a conversation. Understand things are crazy right now, but
Absolutely.
That doesn't sound salesy. That doesn't sound sleazy. That doesn't sound abrasive. Putting that on a 4 or 5 step email drip might be a bit annoying, and that's probably abrasive, but at least one reach out. I don't think there's anything wrong about that.
Yeah. It's got a question from Raj, who's asking, during the present crisis situation, how long do you think it's going to take for our recruiting industry to kind of bounce back?
I think I'd answer that in a kind of a phased approach. So I think some of the sourcing and the screening and some of that stuff will probably continue, as I think it should.
Yep.
I think actually pulling the trigger on a hire might be uncertain, right? You have, like, there's a trickle down of, I worked at a company, TubeMogul, that went through an IPO. We went from 60 to 360 employees through some aggressive growth in about 2 years, right? And there was conversations with the CEO around recalibration, reprioritizing the roadmap, blowing through your hiring roadmap in the first 4 months of your year. And so what's next? And all of these conversations are happening at the C-suite, right? Around prioritization, what's needed now versus what can we delay to Q2, Q3, Q4. And I think recruiting, as much as we can, we should try to get ourselves involved in those conversations so we can be a part of the planning process, right? If we can elevate, if we know a certain rec or a certain type of role in our organization or with our clients is really hard to fill, we need to remind them, okay, fair enough. We know the solutions engineering role is really specific, really difficult. You may not need it to Q3, but it on average takes us 4 months to find, source, and close a candidate in this particular role. So, like, we can make the hire in Q3, but I don't think you should take it off the books, or we unpost the job or remove it as a priority in Q2 or Q1, right? So I think having those informed conversations around, when do you want the hire? Well, when do we need to start planning for the hire?
Right.
And we can provide a lot of value there. So I don't know if that's a direct question to Raj, but I would say now's the time more than ever to sharpen our sword. Like, let's get smarter.
Yep.
Let's figure out that better tool stack that will make us work smarter when the floodgates open in 2 months. I don't think now's the time to just stay still or chill. I think now's the time to experiment with that tool that you don't have the budget for and see if it might add value. And so that once the floodgates do open or budgets open up, which tools you want to move forward with or whatnot.
Absolutely. It's all about, controlling what we can control right now and just taking action. And because there's going to be so much uncertainty, and, one of the things to remember is, certain markets aren't impacted right now. Certain markets are buzzing right now because of, I think obviously healthcare is going to be one that's going to be, overwhelmed, but you're probably not going to get too much traction interacting with a hiring manager right now. Unless you've got that direct in, it'll be a challenge just because they're obviously very consumed. But I think it's important to remember that not every industry is going to be as impacted by this. But the other thing, my thoughts is it's not just the coronavirus. It's it's going to be the result and the effect of the coronavirus after this and what it's going to do to our economy. I think we all need to prepare for a winter and really just like you're saying, like, hey, we got to control what we can control. Let's go out, have as many conversations as we can. Certainly not the time to be quiet. It's a time to be as loud as we've ever been, and go help people.
Yeah, and I think there's always been that kind of flip side in recruitment, right?
Yep.
Who are we helping? Are we helping the candidates? Are we helping the clients or the companies, right?
Yep.
We know who pays the bills, but at the end of the day, now is a wonderful time for recruiters to talk to job seekers and provide some feedback or resume coaching or advice on career trajectories. Hey, if you're 4 years out of school and you want to get to here, there's a couple different paths you could take. Let's have a conversation about what that means. That candidate will never forget the person who helped them figure out the next logical step in their career path, right? So, and again, that's all relationship building, and that'll, again, to your point, it'll come back full circle.
Yeah.
That person you give advice today is going to get a job. They're going to become a hiring manager. They're going to need help recruiting, and they're going to come back to you and say, "You helped me find that job. I'm
Yep.
working with you to find my next hire." You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely. Great point. What's one last piece of advice you can leave everyone with?
That's good. Pardon the pause. I don't have a canned answer for that one. Yeah, I just think we've spent a lot of time talking about the candidate experience. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think let's also think about the hiring manager experience.
Right.
You know, that's the flip side of it. And here we are stuck in the middle as recruiters. So let's not forget our recruiter experience. But, you know, I would think a lot of times we get feedback from recruiters on like, you know, an extra click for the recruiter might feel like work, right? Oh, I've got to click here, or I've got to, like, it's not fully integrated into my suite, so I have to click something, right? Versus saving your hiring manager an hour of their day. So I think with every new tool, every new solution, we've always thought about the triangle around cost, speed, and quality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of pick two, right? You know, there's been that. But I think also with every solution and or process, it's like, look at that triangle from a candidate, hiring manager, and recruiter experience, right?
Right.
These one-way video interview tools might help a recruiter save you time, but creating a terrible candidate experience. Or, you know, that, so I just think it's a bit of a balance, and just to think about everybody's involvement in this recruitment and hiring process. Because, you know, a lot of times we get inundated with what's in front of our screen. We're always busy. We're strapped thin, you know, with a bunch of recs, too many clients, too many candidates. It's a lot to manage. But, you know, just take a step back. At the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make introductions, and we're trying to save hiring managers time.
Yeah. Love it, man. Good stuff. Well, thanks for being here, dude. Thanks for sharing your software. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for people. Again, for those of you that are listening, head over to honeit.com. Take advantage of that free 30-day trial they're offering right now. Now's the time to kind of play with these tools, and really now's the time to be positioning yourself and differentiating yourself from the next recruiter out there. So this will definitely help with that. Nick, thanks for so much for being here, man.
Donnie, I appreciate the time, and I appreciate all the content you're pushing out there. You're doing your thing, helping advance this industry and help everybody kind of work smarter and better. And so I kudos to you for helping push the needle on your end as well.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Just trying to do my best. We'll talk to you guys all soon.
Keep it up. Hang in there. All right, everybody. Cheers.